Hello, welcome once again to It's a Frankly Harry podcast. I'm your host, Frank Weber. So glad you could join me in the forest again this week. I have a very packed show for you today. I know that I'm always defining or maybe redefining this show. Well, maybe just defining. I don't really have a niche or a niche on this show. Because I don't fit very well into a box. My thoughts and values, if you will, they don't fit very well into a box. So I talk about a number of different topics and perhaps one or more than one overarching theme per episode, but I'm going to try to just keep it to one this week while talking about various subjects. And what I wanted to talk about today was the subject of values and why it's important to us in our humanity. Because a lot of people that I've come across, whether it's could be, TV or podcasting or pop culture or politics even. You could name a lot of different mediums. Most people don't talk directly about values, but a person's values are everywhere. I tend to think they spring from beliefs or maybe how we were brought up. But we all have values that we commonly hold to, and I would tell you that the conflict of those values is probably the biggest reason why there becomes conflict between people, various aspects of life. And it's the primary reason why nations get into conflicts with each other and maybe sometimes go to war. Point is that we all have them, and that makes us human, and I get the feeling that we have a lot of the same shared values actually deep down inside, even if we disagree vehemently on certain other values and so forth. It makes us human. It's part of our humanity. Podcasting, whether it's this one or one of the other ones out there, it seems to be a very real and focused and humane medium, because we're talking about a lot of things that are part of the common human experience, I guess you could say, and that's what I'm trying to do here, and that's what I'm hoping to grow the show into as time moves along. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to talk about several different topics. They're all value-based. Actually, everything that I've talked, almost everything that I've talked to up to this point on this show. I guess some of it was entertainment-based, but even then there's a value in trying to entertain you and maybe lighten your load for the day, that you would be, enjoy it and be edified. But then some of it is also a little bit deeper and educational and requires a little bit of maybe a little bit more critical thinking. And some of the things I have on the list here require some critical thinking and, requires some personal first-hand knowledge as well. And I'll do my best to guide you through those if I can, if you'll allow me that opportunity. And so let's go ahead and start for today. I had one follow-up from last week regarding the death of Wink Martindale and a story regarding that. I talked to somebody later that day as well, and I told him about Wink Martindale, somebody who's about my age and remembers him and everything. And in the course of the conversation, so Wink died on April 15th of this year. I never heard anything about it. I'm not sure if it was my fault or if it's the fault of the media somehow in not getting that to me, because I think the media just reports on what they want to report on, and if they don't care, then they think you shouldn't care either, or some craziness like that. But anyway, he died on April 15th of this year. I remember him as host of Tic Tac Dough. And so I'm talking with this other person last week, and he brings up the name Chuck Woolery. and we weren't sure if Chuck has passed or not. I mean, the other guy said that he thought he didn't. And then later I looked it up and found that Chuck passed last November 23rd. Never heard anything about it. He was the original host of Wheel of Fortune before Pat Sajak and actually Vanna White. They came on at about the same time before they took over. And of course, Chuck was also on The Love Connection, which was usually on late at night. I don't even know if they could do a show like that anymore, or whether they could do it properly, or if it's too risky and racy now, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, he died last November 23rd. Never heard anything about it. So anyway, you could say that I value the need to be informed. I know it's not really the best example. It could be my fault that I don't read a lot of news sites or look up a lot of people and everything as much as I should. But, the media also, on the other hand, tends to be a filter for what we know and what we don't know, and, raises some questions on that. So anyway, that's one of my values right there. I like to know about things. Makes the world a little bit bigger place, and we can then respond to it however we need to. So I should say before we move on, R.I.P., rest in peace to Chuck Woolery as well as Wink Martindale. Thankfully, in case you're wondering, Bob Eubanks is still with us. And so we haven't, so I'm thankful for that. Hopefully he's around for a lot longer, although I don't see him much anymore either. So the next topic I wanted to talk about too, I can't remember, I may have talked about this on the old show, but, and this news was out actually last week when I recorded the last episode, but the modern reboot or continuation, I'm not sure what the term is actually, of Night Court was canceled as of May 9th. On my original podcast, Frank Weber's Party, I think I commented on this. I was a fan of the old show because it was very slapstick and it was pretty outrageous, at least for its first few years. I don't know if it kind of waned a little bit after that, but funny show always with a great moral or value taught at the end. I wish we had more shows around like that these days. But unfortunately, the new reboot was canceled after 3 seasons, it appears, and apparently with a cliffhanger on the end. I did get to see the finale. Initially, I thought it was a good show. I thought it was a good effort anyway. Say it was a good show, I'm not sure about, but it was a good effort, an honorable effort given this day and age, with our entertainment choices and seemingly being somewhat more limited, and I, of course, valuing outrageousness and slapstick, but also with good messages, which the old show had. The new show was nothing quite, well, it wasn't nothing like the old show, but it was definitely different. John Larroquette, who played Dan, who was always trying to sleep with all the women on the old show, he was a lot more toned down in this version, and which I guess made sense because he had been married to someone for about 30 years, and she passed away, and he really loved her, and I guess he's not doing his old ways anymore because of that, I suppose. But the new show didn't hit the mark on other areas. I watched it religiously, though, for its first 2 seasons. But then this 3rd season, I lost interest and I missed a bunch of shows and heard that it was on the borderline for being chopped off the schedule and canceled, and that's what happened. I think a lot of it is just part of an issue that happens in a lot of these shows nowadays is that the dialogue. I have a hard time understanding the dialogue because people are either talking too fast or they're mumbling their words, and yet there's still usually a laugh track associated with some of these lines. I don't think they even do studio audiences anymore, but I'm not sure if the original did a studio audience either, but something's wrong with the dialogue, and then the humor in general just seems, it doesn't seem, I mean, I guess it's real, but I just don't get it. I don't know, and I mean, I like some of the other characters. I'm not going to go into too much detail about them, but I don't know. It's sad. It was a good effort, but I think it really fell off the side of the earth this year, and so R.I.P. to Night Court. I know a lot of people didn't want to see it canceled, and there's some remote chance it could get picked up by another outlet, but usually that's the exception rather than the rule. But anyway, I just told you in my story there what I value in my entertainment. What I value started with me as a young kid, and I'd still like to see that again these days, but I guess somehow I'm outside the demographic, you know. If you're over 34 or 35, you're somehow too old for the demographic, even though there's segments of entertainment that should be for everybody, or for certain age groups, I should say. Anyway, that's another value judgment. You may feel differently, but anyway, let's go on to the next topic here. Okay, so now I'm going to move into a couple of observations here that are based on not just observations, but, values, and sometimes some prodding from some other people's values, people I trust, and that sort of thing. I've noticed on the road lately in Canyon, I live in Canyon, Texas, in the Panhandle by Amarillo, and I guess this happens in some other places now too. In the last 2 or 3 years, I've noticed a lot more dead squirrels on the road who have been hit by a car. And I don't really entirely understand what's happening, because back more than 30 years ago when I took driver's ed and we still had a 55-mile-an-hour national speed limit, which is something, by the way, I also commented on my old show. I commented about that and whether people these days in society could really accept something like that ever again. But back in the day of driving school, they said you shouldn't slow down for birds or squirrels. And yet I see dead squirrels on the road at least once a month here around Canyon, and I don't understand what's going on. Like, people are either driving faster like bats out of hell, which a lot of people around here drive like this is Dallas, and it's not. And I mean, generally speaking, I don't think there's a huge rush to at least get around Canyon, maybe a little bit more in Amarillo. But anyway, people are either driving too fast or the squirrels have gotten really slow. And so I'm an advocate for people obeying the speed limit. You might go a few miles over that, but not a ton. And other person could look at the values of this and say, well, let's all slow down and be wary of God's creatures and everything like that. I totally get that too. But this is also an issue about people and being too much of a hurry and not slowing down and enjoying life, and perhaps being overwhelmed by our responsibilities. So please, everybody, slow down. Pay attention to what you're doing. When you're in the vehicle, it's better to not run over anything, even if it, is small and doesn't damage your car or anything. So anyway, another personal value for you, if you will. So this weekend, or actually it was a few days ago, my wife went to, my wife and I together went to her favorite casino, WinStar, north of the Red River in Oklahoma, just about an hour from Dallas. I think they generally cater to the DFW crowd. I noticed something there I hadn't seen or noticed a ton before. Anyway, let me give you a little backdrop on this, okay? He's a buddy. I met him one time. He might remember me. I don't know, but One of my inspirations for this show is the Adam Carolla show with his podcast that he's been doing for quite a few years now. And lately he's noticed, as I have whenever I visit an airport, that there's a lot of dogs in the airport, and there's some dogs on planes, more than ever before. And apparently a lot of it has to do, it's not just service dogs, but apparently they're doing a lot of this comfort dog thing. And this is something that we never had before in society. Flying on an airplane, I get that people could be anxious a little bit, and having a dog with them for comfort might help them a little bit. But now I'm seeing a lot of these dogs, not service dogs generally, but generally more of a comfort dogs, going with people into casinos. And they seem like they were almost all over the place when we went to WinStar a few days ago. And I can't quite explain what the issue is there compared to flying. You know, obviously, going to a casino is supposed to be for recreation and entertainment. And I know it's difficult. I mean, I'm not really the gambler in the family, of course. If I go on a machine or two and I don't even get like a small win or something, then I get kind of pissed and I'm going to give up and I don't want to gamble anymore. You know, if you can't even get a few pennies back on a machine, and I don't know, maybe that's the source of their anxiety, is that they're going to go and gamble and then not win anything or lose a lot of their money or anything. But I cannot for the life of me understand why a lot of people are bringing their dogs to the casino now, and a lot of times having them there on the casino floor while they gamble, which is a weird environment because they say that, you know, a lot of people said that the floor is very dirty and there's a lot of spilled drinks and probably other crazy shit on the ground, and then there's of course the smoke in the casino as well. So is it really a healthy environment for them or anything? Anyway, that's observation for you, and one that I can't explain. I should call into Adam's voicemail thing and tell him about this. I don't know why the dog phenomenon is happening now in casinos. I mean, like I said, I kind of understand planes. People want to be comforted, but I don't get the casino thing at all. If you have an answer out there, by the way, I'd be more than willing to hear your comment or DM me. Always make that available to you every week. All right, so I still have a few more topics here. I'm just purporting to you my values here, and I'd love to hear your values on this topic as well, just as I just mentioned with the dogs here. One thing in our society that I'm always kind of perplexed in, many of you know that I went back to school and finished the first semester of what's going to be about a 2-year calendar program in financial planning and business administration, right? And the business aspect of it, something that bothers me a lot of times. People will have an idea, or maybe they can kind of do, or they have a skill, and they want to make a business into it, right? And I'm certainly for that freedom and people being able to want to do it, but I think a lot of times people get caught up in the idea that, well, I'm going to do this and I'm going to make a lot of money at it. But the reality is you first have to create something of value first for the customer in order to get paid. But a lot of people put the idea of making money and maybe even becoming rich from it ahead of focusing on your skill or your product and creating that value first. And we don't hear about this a lot in today's society, in this, in a society where I think a lot of times there's, it's almost in it, greed has been around at least as long as I've been around, and maybe before that, in this society, but it seems like it's on steroids now. And people will, if you ask somebody, why does a business exist? they'll say like, oh, well, they exist to make money. And they'll say that because, well, if they don't make money, they'll go out of business, which is true. But then they don't understand that that business has to promote or has to produce a certain value for its customer or consumer in order to make money and then grow and basically pay off its stakeholders and all these other things. And so in a sense, that seems like kind of a misnomer. They have to create a value first before they can get paid and then do all the other things that businesses do. And that's not actually something I learned this semester, but I've heard a few people say that in the past, but not that many. And I don't know how many people in the world understand that. I've tried to create value from this show. I haven't been paid a dime for it yet. Do I know if I'm really producing value for you? I don't know for sure. I really don't. But I think what I'm saying is good and worthwhile, and if taken to heart, I think could benefit a lot of people. But my primary issue here is to talk about things like values and the human condition and our time on this earth, our experiences, that sort of thing. And a related topic, by the way, to business, I've also heard this a lot too. We were talking about this discussion of greed. I'm not really a big fan of the Gordon Gekko quote about greed is good. I mean, the people can make more money if they're greedy, but maybe you should focus a little bit more on the value that you provide for your customer. A lot of people will say like, well, capitalism is the reason for the greed. It promotes more greed. And while that may be true, socialism is greedy as well, but in ways that are probably a little bit more harmful. The greed tends to be concentrated at the top. Those who are in control, taking money from the people at the bottom. That's where the greed really is at the top. But then you have all the peasants at the bottom who are probably trying to take from one another the necessities of life, in some situations anyway, maybe not always. But so socialism has greed too. But we never hear about that. So I'm making it plain to you right now. Something to think about. The next time somebody dishes or tries to put down our capitalist system, which I support. I think everybody should go out and get into business and make a living and make as much money as they possibly can, but balance it against what is really important in this life. I mean, have a passion for what you're doing, create a value that people need and appreciate. Try to look at the big picture. Don't work all the time, but work hard. That sort of thing. That's a value of mine. So anyway, I'm going a little bit long on this show today. I think that's okay. I think you'll approve here. I only have a couple more topics that I wanted to discuss today, and honestly, I could come up with such a long laundry list of everything, but we had the MBA course that I took this year in marketing. We had this online. Everything I took was online, right? And I can get into whether I like the online platform or not versus going in person. But I discussed a little bit on marketing. I discussed a little bit about my career in dentistry and how it was difficult as a small practice and a small business owner to market, because I didn't really know what I was doing marketing-wise in many cases. But some people would ask me either directly or indirectly, or just, I don't know, maybe they were just entering their comment on this, but about why I left dentistry. And by the way, please don't turn off the show at this point, because I know a lot of people, I start talking about dentistry, it just the interest seems to drop and everything. I'm not going to get into like any technical or political issues or any arguments over it, but The real reason that I left is because there was a shift in values within the profession, I think, and I think part of it was because the leadership changed, and maybe we have a lack of leadership now. This used to be a very independent profession where it was basically controlled by dentists and for dentists or dental professionals anyway. And now it's a profession where there's a lot of different hands in the cookie jar, and a lot of people who have never been on the front lines in dentistry kind of telling you how you're supposed to practice and how you're supposed to produce and how you're supposed to make their corporation or their organization richer somehow by doing it. And it wound up being, it's all completely about changed values and values that are different from when I was in school even, and trying to get into the profession. And I could go into a tremendous amount of detail about that. I one of the issues that I have, lately I've been taping this show on Monday morning for a Wednesday release, and a lot of times I kind of go over in my head a lot of first about what I'm going to say, and then it sounds really good when I first say it, and then I try to bring it over to the show, and it doesn't. I don't know if it sounds quite as good or not, but in a lot of cases, like what people would say, like, well, I didn't leave dentistry, but dentistry left me, and that would be basically the truth as well. We seem to be kind of placating everybody else but ourselves now in the profession. Dentists are, whether that's a corporate boss who's not a dentist, or we've always had to deal with patients, and that's always been that can be a joyous thing or it can be a hellish thing, depending on their attitude toward dentistry. But then we're dealing also with employees and regulators and all these other things to kind of take away from what your idea and expectation for the profession were, and that's what happened in my case. And so now I've changed gears, and I'm going back to school as well as continuing to do this podcast, this ever-evolving, ever-improving podcast. And I could probably do an entire show on it if people were willing to listen. But, dentistry is it was always a difficult profession in terms of handling and managing patients and their treatment and everything, but there's so many other responsibilities and so many other parties now. It's just, and the money isn't that good, at least in general dentistry. I really don't know how it's that much better in specialty. But I always thought that there were other guys in the profession, generalist or specialist, who knew a lot more than I did on that. But anyway, that's a value deal, and because of my values, I've decided life is too short for the stress and the hassles, and I'm going this different direction now. So anyway, that's pretty much all I wanted to say there. Just think about it as you go about this week, your values, and what are your values, and how do they shape yourself, your thoughts and ideas, and where you are in life and where you want to be in life, and how does it shape relationships with other people. It's everywhere, and it's worthy of consideration. I should also tell you, but I don't want to get your hopes up too much, that the weather seems to be stabilizing a lot and warm enough now that I could maybe try my naturism experiment here pretty soon. I was kind of hoping before classes start up again, either this week or next week. But again, I don't know. I've got some other complicating factors going on with that desire, and I don't know. I really only need to sneak away for one day, I think, to try it. But anyway, I plan to report that to you whenever, if and when I wind up doing that. But this summer should be a really great time for that. And that's all about, not to get too, it's, non-sexual nudity, recreational setting. People are basically recreating as they were created. There's nothing lascivious or offensive about it. It's just people accepting yourself and accepting one another. And I've heard some great things about it, so it's worth checking out. And I would be more than happy to report on it when I'm able to report on it. So anyway, I guess that's about it for this week. The counter's already over half an hour, so this is definitely a special show, chock full of information for you. Anyway, just as always, I thank you for listening, and I ask you to tell your family and friends and anybody you run into wherever about It's a Frankly Hairy podcast, and that we meet in a forest of sorts every week. Hit that subscribe button, leave me a message, DM or comment. I know the DM thing is a little controversial because of the existence of bots. Apparently, there's bots now on Substack, I think. I could be wrong about that since I'm not really a computer expert. And the algorithm, I think, on the Substack social media site isn't always what I would like to see from it either. But anyway, such is the nature of the world and the imperfections of it, and whether they align with our values or not, I guess I should say. But anyway, I've read some good articles there, though, too. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and sign it off. I'm starting to ramble here. But anyway, It's a Frankly Hairy podcast, coming from the forest again. This is your host, Frank Weber, signing off. I'll see you again next week. Bye. Love you.